Hi everyone. How does a samurai army get led? Who leads a samurai army? How many stages of ranks are there? Are the ranks unified across Japan? The answer to this is we only have half an answer. We know a certain amount. But like always, and it pretty much goes with every samurai question, the further back in time you go, past the year 1500, you start to get into a hazy place. And especially back past 1300 and beyond, it starts to get really difficult. So today I'm going to take you through a more casual video about the sit back, relax. It's not one of those algorithm videos. Just sit back, relax, and I'll take you through it. Now, this month we've not got the Shogunate and we've not got Stephen Ojiri doing the monthlies, but this will be in the monthly playlist. But we have had a video from Scott from Sengoku Studies. But here's my second video for this month. Right, who's at the top of samurai hierarchy? Now, a lot of the time we have the classics like the Taiheki and all those sort of war chronicles that tell us, and they name the different positions. But one of the fundamental things you first have to know is that there are one major divide, giving you two sides in samurai hierarchy. One is the imperial court, and the other one is the samurai structure. Now you would say, hold on a minute, the imperial court is the nobles and they're not samurai, but actually samurai intermingle with them, they're intermarried into them, and they try to get these honorific terms. So if you're just there, you're in Japan, and you look at the samurai army, you've got to think in Kyoto, there is some imperial court, there's nobles, there's people with like haughty titles. They've probably never been out of Kyoto, or if they have, they've been on a picnic adventure to the local cherry blossom park. Then you get some samurai in there who are hardened samurai, who are out in the rest of Japan doing the hard work, but some samurai as well who've not really done much, and it's all intermingled. And you also get another division, which is those who are divided by their talent and those who are divided by their blood. Now, this is the same in the West and in Europe. You might get someone who's a hard-lined commander with a cut face, grey hair, his sword is there. He knows everything about war. But his superior is a 14-year-old boy who's the son of XXX person who is put there as a symbolic head or a symbolic commander who might know nothing, but we consider that, or in the medieval world, it's considered that prestige comes from your family lineage. So if you don't have the right ancestors, it's, you can only go so far. There's, for example, you can never become the emperor because you don't have the right ancestors, and then you can't become shogun because you don't have the right ancestors. So here's a very quick rundown. Oh, sorry, not very quick. I'm going to slow it down. Sorry, I'm going to stop doing that. Right, so I'm going to do one system first, a very basic system. You might have the emperor who's in charge, yeah? And then the shogun. The shogun is not, you've got to be careful with the word shogun, guys. The word shogun normally means the ruler of Japan, but actually back in the original days, it's the general of the army. So then you get the, I've got them written down here so I don't forget them. Then you get the taisho. So the taisho is also a term used to mean a commander. Then you just get sho, which means commanders, can mean commanders of certain divisions, but it isn't always that, because they just, like the Japanese are not so logical with this, they're just intermixing, say this and say that and move that. So you also get, so far we've got the emperor, the shogun, the taisho. Sometimes the shogun is the taisho, it depends which one you're using. You then get kashira, who's in charge of a smaller one, and then you get kokashira, who's in ahead of that kashira, and then you get the general body of people. You also get things like doshin who come along, and sort of doshin are those of the same mind. People are sort of attached to squads, so you can go all the way from the top to the bottom and see an increment of, say, 8 places, yeah, something like that, down to the lowest ashigaru. But in the middle of that you also get commanders of certain divisions. So we get hierarchical going up, but you also get commanders of certain divisions. So you get like the 6 commanders, and this usually the word bugyo is magistrate or like a war commander, and you get what's called a samurai bugyo, or musha bugyo, and they're the people in charge of the majority of the samurai. You get hata bugyo, which is the people who are in charge of the flags, so you need there's a couple of them. You might get ashigaru bugyo, who's actually in charge of the ashigaru, but he's not an ashigaru himself. He's a samurai, and a high-ranking samurai, and he has samurai kashira underneath him, and he has kokashira who have ashigaru below them. So It's not always the same, guys. It depends on the structure of your army. But you could have an entire division of just samurai led by a samurai commander. But you could also have a samurai commander leading samurai, who in turn lead ashigaru, who have doshin connected to them, you know, and it all sort of forms like that. But we do have Western accounts that go back to the 1580s, 1590s from memory, and they talk about people leaving a castle, the samurai leaving a castle, and they came out in troops of 5, and some had a gold hilt, some had a silver hilt, and there was literally divisions by colour. So it's almost like a Western army with, like, this is the gold division, that's the silver division, or you had the people in the ranks themselves had silver on their swords, while the commander had gold on his sword, so you could see them. We do know from the Book of Samurai series, the other Book of Samurai series, I say the other because I'm going to show you this in a minute, but the Red Book of Samurai, it talks about using your Sagio cord as identification markers. Sometimes they all wore uniform, sometimes they had banners which all look the same. So you could have, in a samurai world, you could have someone who was you could have one army that was like all higgledy-piggledy, I love that word, higgledy-piggledy or helter-skelter, and they're all over the place, and it's like he's got this colour on and they've got that colour on. But we do start to see unification by the 1500s of uniformed, bannered emblems, Sagio cords that match, that people go out in step, marching in step, uniform. You could actually say it's very close to the sort of like the regiments of the British Army going out in, you know, in their sections. And when the Western Jesuits came along, they were like, that's really organised, and really, you know, they were really impressed by these massive armies going out, long pikemen. Nobody ever talked about pikemen in Japanese warfare, very few people. You had really long pikes, and apparently naginata used to be really long, and they've cut them down. I think I got that information from Scott, actually, from Sengoku Studies. So, but anyway, returning back, you then have, so in the Book of Samurai, this one, Samurai Arms, Armour and the Tactics of Warfare, you have this on page 242, and this is where it starts to get complicated. So you get Jo Shogun, yeah, which means the higher shogun, U Shogun and Sa Shogun, the shogun of the left and the shogun of the right. Then you get like lower, middle, and I can't remember this one, it's inverted backwards, but I can at least see those two, not inverted, they're inverted backwards for me, guys. But basically you get this sort of connection, this hierarchy, and these, so not even the word shogun is not just one. You get Jo Shogun, U Shogun, Sa Shogun, lower shogun, upper shogun, and the idea here is that your army can be broken up into loads of pieces, and somebody takes the right flank divisions, somebody takes the left divisions, somebody's at the rear, and you've got all these types of things. But at the same time, you get these which are more sort of, these are more your blood type things. So for an example, he's here somewhere. So Kunshin, sorry. So this is a crazy one. We've had to put this together, but basically it goes either way, and it's weird. So you get Kunshin, which is the type. I'll read it to you. The term Shu here means Jo Shogun. Oh, sorry, Kunshin. The term Kun refers to a lord, while Shin refers to generals and high-ranking retainers, such as a samurai daisho. However, this position is not the level of Jo Shogun, the supreme leader. So it's for the basic point is for me and you, it's really complicated because we don't have the language there. We're not natives in the language, and we're not actually on the ground doing it, and we don't see it, so you can't really get what's going on without mapping it out properly. But including this, you get something called kokushi, which are princes. Now princes, again, this is a prince to an emperor or the son of a Jo Shogun. So basically the Jo Shogun might be the grizzled old grey-haired guy with the scars down, and he's just mint, and his son's 14. So suddenly you're like, oh, this Kokushi is actually the son. So he might be a really entitled, horrible little bastard, or he might be wonderful and great and really like, you know, his father and mint. So you just don't know, but he gets a position because of his blood. But for example, the Jo Shogun will get his position because he's really good. And then, of course, you might have the emperor, the emperor's son, who comes out to do it. So this stems all the way back to ancient China. So in ancient China, they used to have a lot of these terms, and, you know, little bits of terms like shou and kun. These are like terms for lord and things like that, and shou, leader, lord, yeah, and they go different ways like that. And I'm not sure if that's king, I can't quite remember, but basically you get like sort of lord, king, commander, and it's really hard to put into English because of the connotations you take away of it. But and then of course prince, child of, so that one's like the sort of the child of, the higher ranking ones. So sorry, I've lost my train of thought then. So what we find is that there's lots of small things you might miss and what might get flipped, because you might be like, that guy's a leader because of his bloodline, but he's also a leader because he's good. Oh, sorry. So going back to, yes, I remember now. So going back to ancient China, you might have got imperial families might have led the marches and imperial sons, because originally the imperial side was actually the side which had the ability. They were the higher. I'm sorry, I'm not struggling, guys. What I'm trying to do is think of a way to explain it. But it seems to me that wave after wave of human society, in the way that we used to live, a medieval, feudal, whatever you want to call it, system, always ends up the same. A really talented person becomes high ranking and useful to the community. They then have a few generations of it building, but then the people are not quite the same as their ancestor, and it falls, and then it takes someone else strong to go up and do it. It's never a case of we're going to keep the best man going. It starts that way. Who's the best man? Who's the best man to be our Viking chief? Who's the best man to be our new leader? The loaf giver, the bread giver, the lord. Who is the best loaf giver? That's where we get the word lord from. And it's like, oh yeah, no, it's this, that he's the best. But then it's like, well, his son, he's like a prince, let's make his son. And then, well, you wouldn't take it away from that family, because that family have been good to us for a few generations, so we'll do the next. But then eventually they fail. So what you find, it's the same in Japan. They're going off the Chinese system. The imperial family are there, and they're really hard, grisly men who are sort of doing it. And then the next thing, it just goes on after generation, they become effeminate and a bit useless and not very good. And and then the next thing is, well, we'll put a general in charge because it's not we should be doing poetry, so we'll put a general in charge. Then that general is like, oh, I'll imitate the poetry of those guys, and his sons imitate it, so they go in, and then we'll get someone stronger, and it just goes in these waves. So when we talk this month, we're talking about samurai leadership. So what you need to take away from this, guys, is that samurai leadership comes in two main divisions: those of the blood, those of ability. Yeah, you also need to remember that different forces have different names, and a lot of my names come specifically from the Takeda line or the Tokugawa line, because we're going through the Natori clan. Okay, but hopefully, and which are influenced by Kusunoki. So that's the type of thing he's bringing together there. His name is Natori Sanjuro Masazumi from the 1660s. So you've got there's two lines. There's blood and there's ability. There's also the different versions that exist in Japan, but also it might be far more Western and logical, if that's the way we can say, in the second half of the samurai times, and a bit more esoteric and a bit more distant in the first half. Now, that's not to say it wasn't all structured. It was. I don't mean that they didn't have structure in the early days. They really did. In fact, it was ridiculously structured. But what I mean is, it was, once the Western guns started coming in, you start to see a very different change in the way the samurai do things. You see a lot less magical stuff being put in. So to go back to some of, I think I'm going to be correct in saying it's Stephen Nojiri's thoughts are that actually in the beginning there's lots of magic. In the middle period, they becomes really, like in Nobunaga's time, it becomes really like, let's get rid of the magic. Takeda, Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, Tokugawa, they're all like, let's just, not get rid of it, but let's tone that bit down and go for like, let's just use some guns instead of like sending a horse with a negative charm on it to the enemy. Let's just shoot the enemy with a gun. And and like, oh, there's the star of Hagun in the sky, the star of defeat, just shoot them. Do you know what I mean? It starts to get like that. But then we hit the Edo period, the esoteric start bits coming back, and it starts going back into the swordsmanship schools, and we start doing lots more magic. I'm not saying it never left, but you might get waves of height and low and then back again, where you start to get a lot of magical things come in. So we've got a commander at the top, but the shogun might be not only one person, it might be multiple people, and he's the general of the army, and he goes out and does things, and he has princes alongside him. He's looking after the lord's prince here, because you might get the lord who stays at home, the daimyo, but daimyo is not always the correct word, because you go back to after before a certain point and the word daimyo doesn't exist. I have actually an idea that it might be just pronounced taimyo, but and it's changed, the pronunciation has changed over time. Taimyo, time changed. But the point being is, don't worry too much about the Japanese terms, because no matter where you go in Japanese time or in Japanese geography, it starts to change. And we only know that handful. Everyone knows shogun, daimyo, things like that. But you go before that and you start to struggle. And like we're saying there with Kokushi, is that the princes, even I'm struggling because I've not read it for 2 minutes. And they're princes, but nobody knows about that. Do you know what I mean? So just take away from this video that it's complicated, but not impossible. But it is structured, and it isn't always the same in the Edo period to the Sengoku period to the early periods, the Heian period and all that. They are, even though there's lots of links and it is samurai and it looks similar, there are slight differences and variations between the clans and the time. Okay, guys, if you want to help me out, get yourself a copy of the Book of Samurai, Samurai Arms, Armour and the Tactics of Warfare. Unfortunately, we're going to miss the old Nick and Stephen Ojiri this month, but they've got stuff to do, so they'll be back with us hopefully soon and getting set up. But thanks to Scott for joining in on this one. I want you guys to put your comments below. What do you know about pre-daimyo days? Tell us about pre-daimyo days. What do we know about them? And get yourself a copy of Tolkien's World if you fancy reading a bit for fun. See you later.